Welcome, everyone. It's Three Righteous Mamas, a podcast that is on a mission to transform our country. We tell the stories that matter, celebrate the power and hope of pissed off mamas who are building a better future for all of our children. Hi, I'm Cristina Sensun Ramirez.
I'm Muna Husseini.
I'm Martha Pincoffs.
And we are the Three Righteous Mamas. We're so excited for you all to be here. We have an incredible guest, which we're going to tell you more about, Doctor Abdul El-Sayed. We're going to be talking about how we build that country we want for all of our children, where we can have the basic things that we want for them, like healthcare, and especially what that means during a pandemic. Abdul is one of the leading voices nationally on this issue, and we're really excited to have him. But before we get down to business with him, I'm wondering, ladies, how you all are preparing for the holidays that are just around the corner. Martha, what are you all going to do with your kids?
So this weekend, Joe is going to go pick up her mom from College Station, and her mom will be with us for the rest of at least the rest of the year, but probably into the spring. And we're going to be here and celebrate Christmas for the very first time in our house. Normally we go to College Station. What about you?
So I'm really excited because Santi's 3 now. So he's like getting all of what the holiday season is about. I'm really into crafting and really into Home Alone and cooking and matching Christmas PJs. So we are all about all of it. Yes. And the big thing we're struggling with, because Santi's 3, is learning the concept of giving a gift, because we took him to the store to pick out some gifts for his cousins, and he has some very girly cousins that are like love Barbies and unicorns, and all he wanted to get them, he swore that what they would love were fighter helicopter pilots and dinosaurs.
Obviously.
That sounds like that's
where we're at. But Muna, I guess before I ask you, obviously, Christmas is not a holiday that's part of the Muslim faith. And so I'm wondering for you, like, how is this time for your kids? And just what's that like for y'all?
Yeah, it's really interesting because Muslims do believe in Jesus, but we do not celebrate Christmas, or at least my family doesn't. There might be Muslims out there that do. And so, Christmas is everywhere. It's like every cartoon, every commercial, every movie, if we were going anywhere, there'd be like Christmas music. The one thing I super love, so I actually like the Christmas season. I love going in my neighborhood and seeing the lights. Like, it is just so magical for the kids. And especially now, since there's nothing else to do, we like use it as an excuse to like go out and check out the lights. But yeah, it is definitely, it can be hard to navigate because Christmas is so much fun. And then the kids are like, why can't we do all this stuff? And I have to come up with ways to be like fun and cool that's not Christmas and not at Christmas time. So it's definitely something to navigate, especially because like our own holidays, we don't get time off for, right? Like my kids still have to go to school. They might have a test on the day of, right? And then they have to like take a day off, and sometimes teachers aren't always understanding. And so it's definitely an interesting time for us.
So when did they start understand? I mean, like, there is no way as a child in this country that you can avoid the idea of Christmas. Me personally, I love me some Mariah Carey Christmas. Like, I am one of those people that loves Christmas music, right? Though people also celebrate it really differently. But I'm wondering for you, like, when did your kids start understanding the concept, and how did you explain and navigate that?
Well, we've always been pretty open with our kids about everything. Like, I talked to my daughter about the birds and the bees when she was 7, because I was pregnant with my second. And so we cover everything. And so, I think just as normal, we talked, my daughter was asking me about Santa. And I think it came up because we were at the mall and there were kids who were taking pictures with Santa. And then she saw like the Santa go outside and take a smoke. She was like, that is not a real Santa. And I was like, but for some kids,
became rated like are right now, Santa is real for people.
That's right.
To believe.
That is absolutely true.
Just
I'm
kidding.
sorry.
Just kidding.
Oh my God.
Like, go ahead.
I know. So I have a story to tell because my daughter, if I remember correctly, she was in second grade at the time, and the teacher asked a question. Like, for the life of me, I can't remember what the question was, but it was something along the lines of, is Santa coming to your house, or is Santa real, or what do you think about Santa? And my daughter raises her hand and says, well, we don't believe in Santa Claus. And then the teacher was all sorts of like upset and like backpedaling. And I think a bunch of parents called being like upset that some kid ruined Santa. And I totally get it. But I kind of want to be like, hey, you asked a question. You can't get mad if kids give you what their answer is, right? And like, we ended up having to go to the principal, and I wanted to be like, no, like I have taught my daughter to like speak her truth, and that like, no matter what she's saying, if she feels strongly about it, stick to her guns and like to keep going no matter what. Like, you will find an adult who listens to you if you feel strongly about what you're saying. And so, yeah, like,
I just want to understand, you had to go to the principal.
More about the principal.
You had to go to
it was really serious.
Because your daughter told the truth about a fantasy. Just like,
well, she ruined Santa for some kids, I guess. And I can appreciate that is upsetting for folks. Like, I get it, but like the teacher shouldn't have asked the question. Like, you have, a diversity of representation in your room. Not everybody in the room is Christian all the time. And even the folks who are Christian may not be practicing,
Right.
and so yeah, I kind of like, she was so scared about getting in trouble. And I thought, what? You didn't even do anything. Let's go get ice cream. And she was like, oh, okay. But we did have a conversation later. And with my 4-year-old, I have been able to be like, yes, like Santa goes to the houses of people who believe in Santa. So that is the answer in our house now.
well, it's interesting to me. I don't know. I know, Muna, you and I are both immigrant kids, right? So like when my family, we would always go to Mexico growing up for mostly Christmas. We would actually spend in Mexico. And it wasn't until recently that Santa even existed in Mexico. He didn't exist until like probably 5 years ago, really. We only celebrated the Three Kings Day as when you got gifts. And so, yeah, it's like interesting how, I guess since you grew up here, you always knew about Santa. Like Santa was always part of who I was, but it was interesting. He didn't actually cross the border. Like he was only here.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up basically in an American environment, and so I always knew what Santa was, but I also knew that we didn't like, my parents were real. They would just be like, we're different, deal with it, suck it up. Like, there wasn't any nice talk, there wasn't any trying to like figure out how to make it nice for the kids. Like, back home when we used to go to India for Eid and our own religious celebrations, it's a huge deal and there's a lot of celebration. But when you're here, it's not as fun, or it wasn't when we were growing up. And so like now for my own kids, I try to make it more exciting. And it's not just me, like our generation will do things like a gift exchange and like, create our own traditions. And like we do our own like holiday portraits or whatever. But like my parents didn't do any of that stuff. So we try to make things special for our own kids, but definitely not for Christmas. Though my sister's birthday is very close to Christmas and she super hams it up and she's like, this holiday is about me. Feel free to give me all the presents you want. Like there's like a countdown that starts in early December. So, we'll take all the holidays, even if we don't celebrate them. The time off is always a gift.
Get the advent calendar for your sister's birthday.
She'd be happy to have one, like one gift every day, all the way till like it'd be over. So with that said, tell us about our guest that's coming up.
So we have a really amazing guest coming up in Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. He is many things. He is brilliant. He's an American politician, former public health professor. He's a medical doctor and a civil servant. He has run for office. He ran for governor in Michigan and has since founded Southpaw Michigan, a political action committee to help other progressive candidates in Michigan. He's visionary, and I am just so excited to dig in and get his perspective on where we are right now and where we're headed, how we can build this better.
Let's get started, y'all.
Thank you for being the first dude on our show. So we start the show asking everybody the same question to sort of to center and pull that thread through. But the show is Three Righteous Mamas, and one thing that that we're always curious about is there a mother figure that you have in your life, or that you had in your life, that helped shape who you are and how you engage with the world now today? And could you tell us a little bit about that person in that relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my Teta Soad, my grandmother. She's my father's mother. Wisest, most intelligent, best tempered human being I've ever met in my life. She never got to go to school. She raised 6 kids among 8 to whom she gave birth, 2 of whom died before the age of 1. And my Teta had this just ability to size up people and situations in ways that always brought this profound optimism out of them and the situation. It was like she could see the best in everyone and knew how to coax it out. And I mean, she was all 5'1", 5th child of 9. Born in Egypt, where working class women didn't go to school. And when I'd go to Egypt, I was the eldest son of her eldest son, and my father had left Egypt back in '78, and so I was the only one of my cousins being raised outside of Egypt at that point. And my father and his family come from a really working class part of Egypt. And so my grandfather had an 8th grade education. He sold vegetables in a fish market. And so I'd go, and my main caretaker when I'd be in Egypt, my parents wouldn't come, it would just be me. And I'd take that 15-hour journey and land in a very different place than where I'd started. And my grandmother, she almost took it upon herself to remind me who I was. And I remember she'd point to one of my cousins and say, that one's smarter than you. Point to another one and say, that one's better looking than you. Point to a third one and say, that one's better at sports than you. Point to a fourth one and say, that one's nicer and kinder than you. Point to a fifth one. I was just like, I don't really know what I bring to the world at this point. And her point would always be, you have opportunities. And she couldn't even know what those opportunities were, because she'd never actually been a part of an institution, not one. I mean, the institution that she'd ever had access to was her own family. But she knew about the opportunities that I had. She could understand the chasm in the kind of life that I could lead versus my cousins, who are, she's right, smarter, better looking, kinder, gentler, better people. And I always remember that she would tell me, you're only as good as what you make out of the opportunity you have. And so in so many ways, I've had a very roundabout career where I've made decisions that most folks don't often make. I left a career in clinical medicine. I didn't do a residency because I didn't believe in the healthcare system. After I got to see it firsthand as a medical student, I left my tenure track academic job at an Ivy League school to rebuild a health department in Detroit. I left that to run for governor. And folks would always ask, like, why are you making these decisions? Because, and for me, it was always that recognition of, like, what would my teta say? Like, what is it all worth anyway? And I think sometimes we affiliate too strongly with our institutions. We allow them to validate us in ways that sometimes mean that we are serving their ideals rather than ours. And for too many institutions, we've watched as those ideals get fundamentally reconfigured around what's in the best interest of the people leading those institutions. And I've tried always to remember that the smartest, wisest, best human being I've ever met never got to go to school. And there's nothing special about me because of the opportunities that I had. They're just responsibilities. And I reflect on the truth of the lives that my cousins lead and the life that I get to lead. And it is a reminder just how much more I owe because of the opportunities that I've had. And so I'm really, really grateful for my Teta Sohad. She is the probably most impactful person in my life, and a constant reminder that merit and prestige and awards and money, they don't make quality. and I'm really grateful for that.
You know, Abdul, I have a question, which I might be taking a leap here, but I'm Indian by background. And when you were talking and you were saying, I am the eldest son of the eldest son, I don't know if that translates. I think it does for many Americans, but I think back home, that actually comes with a special weight of like caring for everyone in the family. And everyone does not mean, you know, your two siblings and, you know, the 1-bedroom house. Like everyone is like hundreds of people. When I couple that with, it sounds like there was a humility your teta was trying to instill in you of like, look at all of these people and look at where you are. Even if you're the eldest of the eldest, let me settle you in what this pecking order should be. And then I hear you talking about how you kind of are bucking what the regular path is, right? Of like not settling. Talk to me a little bit about that and how it can't be easy to change your path and build a new one, right? If I string those three things together.
Yeah, no, it's a really thoughtful question. My family background is really uncommon insofar as my parents had me and then got divorced immediately, and then each remarried. And my mother married a translator and they promptly moved abroad. And then my father married a woman from a place called St. Louis, Michigan. And her family goes back to the founding of this country. She's a daughter of the American Revolution. So it was from a cultural perspective, a lot of times we talk about code switching. I spent most of my childhood code translating. So it was constantly trying to think about what are the responsibilities that come with this particular odd patriarchal positionality in a heavily patriarchal culture, with this positioning in a country where I am a child of immigrants, but also in a community where, growing up in the Muslim American community, where I have this odd access to a space that most folks growing up as Muslim Americans don't have. And I think the power that my teta's message had for me was a recognition that you only sort of really appreciate where you are in stopping and engaging with the humanity of the people that you're engaged with. And there was a sort of ability to see beyond the culture that I was sitting in, because I was forced constantly to be translating it via all of these different milieus. And then also to recognize that your positionality, your opportunities come with a profound sense of responsibility. I grew up with relative to my cousins, a tremendous amount of privilege. I had a two-parent household. Both my parents were highly educated. We never really wanted for, but then I could, think just literally into the contrapositive of my cousins, or the world where my father doesn't get to move, and see exactly what my life would have been. All of that is to say that the appreciation for how culture shapes what we think we ought to do, mm-hmm. and how structural opportunity shapes what we can do, and how positionality and the accident of one's birth and one's positionality in the world changes your ability to leverage those two things. I was really lucky to be able to see beyond the curtain in my own life. And I think a lot of times we don't, because most of the situationality that we live in is fixed. And for me, it wasn't. Right? I could hop between these different worlds, go from Alexandria, Egypt with one grandmother to, Montcalm County, Michigan with my other grandmother. And very few people could know these two worlds, right? It was always crazy to me that these two people in these two different worlds could never know each other. They would never know each other. And yet I got to live in both of them, and live seamlessly, relatively seamlessly in both of them, but always kind of as the one with the asterisk, right? And what the responsibility then becomes about leveraging the power and positionality from one into the other, and asking, how do we address inequity? How do we take on poverty? How do we take on the forces of racism on their own terms sometimes, and then sometimes out of their terms, because the only way to engage with them is to see them as fundamentally wrong and a perversion of the way people are supposed to be toward each other. But at the same time, to understand how they are created. I just think that was, I'm really lucky to have had that. And I hope that I've spent most of my career trying to move between these different careers, right? To get at this question of how do we service equity and how do we take on inequity, in the same way that I was able to move between these cultures and sort of understand how they relate to one another while being caught kind of in the middle, but as part of both.
I mean, to me, it speaks to me a lot as like half Mexican, half white kid. I always felt like, well, I get to see in these two worlds. And I also get to see that, you know, my Mexican family works so hard, but it doesn't seem to matter how hard they work. They never get the same opportunities as my other family. And as like a kid, it just strikes you as cruel and unfair. Like it doesn't make any sense that the same people you love that care for you in the same way actually have so much greater access. And it's like, where are you born? What did you inherit? So that speaks to me a lot. I was really, really excited too about your book, which we're linking for folks, and everyone should buy a copy. It's Healing Politics, A Doctor's Journey into the Heart of Our Political Epidemic. A super timely book. You, of course, are an epidemiologist, as well as someone that's super entrenched in politics, which is why it's so critical that we have your voice in this crisis. And, you know, you've become an incredibly strong voice on the issues that our country is facing. But one of the things that you talked about in your book that I think is about, you know, we're in the face of a pandemic, but you also talked about the epidemic of insecurity in our country. And I think it spoke to both Martha, Muna, and myself very deeply. And we wanted you to just talk a little bit about that for the folks that are listening.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful that you picked it up. And you know, one way to get at this notion that you spoke to so well. I don't know if folks remember back to their algebra days, but the basic the basic model of a linear function is y equals mx plus b, if you guys remember that, right? Y is the outcome.
You're taking me back. No.
I didn't even remember it then. Like,
I was like, someone was a straight A student over here. You're talking to a steady C student. So
yeah,
I'm listening. I'm paying attention.
Two C's.
But the x was the unit that you put in. It was the variable that you could change, right? And then the y was the outcome. And then you had these other two variables, the m and the b. The b is where you started, right? And the m is the multiplier on your x. And it was always fascinating to me, right? Because we think in this world that y equals x. That's what conservatives want to tell us, right? They want to tell us that if you work hard, you get good outcomes. And that's just it. But they forget the power of M and B. And I think the point that you made, Christina, is that M is super important. What you get out of the work that you put in is a function of this multiplier that so many people have stripped away from them, and then a function of where you started. And you know, if you want to understand privilege, it is the fact that your M and your B are really big, right? You start at a really high level, and then every ounce of work that you put in, you see leaps and bounds in the outcome. And then for so many people, right? I mean, you know, to get real theoretical about it, if your M is somewhere between 0 and 1, in fact, the input makes your Y smaller, right? And you know, for too many people, right? You start with a very small M and a very, very, very small, if not negative, B. And we have to recognize that our job in this world is to try and address that fact and make sure that everybody's work turns into outcome. And recognize that there are structural features that address that. And to the point about the book, you know, right now it's easy for us to focus on this pandemic of coronavirus because, of course, it is the most imminent and urgent pandemic. But I'll argue to you that we actually have two other pandemics that we're dealing with. The first is a pandemic of systemic racism, right? And just to put a number on that, right? COVID-19 has taken 219,000 lives as of Sunday, October 18th. And that's a lot of lives. I mean, it makes it one of the top 5 killers in the United States right now. And that's not supposed to happen. But David Satcher, who was the Surgeon General under Bill Clinton, did a very basic study. And in 2005, he asked a very simple question. How many lives would we save if we were able to reduce the Black mortality rate so that it was the same as the white mortality rate? And he estimated that we would save 83,000 lives a year. And considering that we've been dealing with structural racism in this country for 401 years, I want you to ask yourself how many people have died because of that problem. And it is far-reaching, and it changes fundamentally the experience of living for Black and Indigenous people of color in particular, but for people of color in general. And then you've got the pandemic that I talk about in this book, this notion of insecurity. And what I mean by that is this subjective experience of fear for the future, for yourself and your children and the people you care about, because of the experience of loss over a long period of time that is a function of the crumbling of a number of systems that we've relied upon to deliver the basic means of a dignified life for a very long time in this country, right? Whether it's healthcare or housing or education or infrastructure or an economy or the access to the vote. What we've seen is that we have sold these systems off to large corporations who exclude those with the least and extract from everyone else. And that has left us in this sort of state of loss, in the state of fear. And that has left us extremely vulnerable to the kind of demagoguery that we have seen from the president and so many others in this moment, telling us that the reason things are bad for you, right, is because of those other people over there.
Yeah.
Rather than the system has been rigged against you so that a lot of people can make, or a small number of people can make a lot of money off of your basic life.
Yeah, and I think when we think about healthcare and the fact that we're the only industrialized nation on the planet that doesn't offer our people a guaranteed right to healthcare, they've been able to get away with it for so long because they've really tried to divide up who is deserving of healthcare and try and make us believe that, you know, it shouldn't be a right for everyone. And that if we gave it to everyone, unworthy people would have healthcare versus the idea that everyone is worthy. And we are, I think, here in Texas, of course, we are at the front lines of that. We have the highest uninsured rate in the country. When we think about the other crisis you talked about the crisis of structural racism, of course, we were one of the few states that didn't expand Medicaid. We were the state that fought against the Affordable Care Act and got big portions of it repealed. And the function of that has been, you know, thousands of lives that could have been saved had they had healthcare in Texas. So we all know what we're up against, but I think there's an opportunity in crisis to imagine what could be. And for us, can you help paint a picture about the healthcare system that you think would be best for our country? Because you spent so much time on this, and it means a lot to our listeners that are in different places, but especially here in Texas.
Yeah, well, I really deeply appreciate all your efforts in building out an opportunity to talk about and to lead on a more just, equitable, and sustainable country. Christina, I really appreciated your race and was really proud to support you. And I know that Martha and Muna have been doing incredible work as well. I believe deeply in Medicare for All. In fact, that's the next book is in February with co-author Micah Johnson called Medicare for All, The Citizen's Guide. And the goal of that book is just to lay it out plainly. And I want folks to appreciate a couple things that are broken about the healthcare system as it is in order to understand why Medicare for All is the best solution to taking it on. The first is that we tend to think of ourselves as the customer in healthcare. And the problem with that framing is that usually the customer is the one who pays for care. What happens in our system is that if you are lucky enough to be insured, you and your employer pay, or you and your employer pay an insurance company so that you have access to quote unquote insurance. And I want you to remember that the operative word in insurance is sure, right? And what happens is that if you were to get sick, that insurance company then pays the provider, the doctor, the hospital who took care of you. I want you to think about the structure of that financial transaction. right? You have basically paid for the right to have your healthcare paid for, right? That's what you've done. And I want you to then step out of that scenario and think about somebody going to shop for, let's just say, some beets. They go to the grocery store, they find the beets that they want, they put them in the cart, then they go to the cashier, they put the beets on the conveyor belt, the beets get rung up, let's say they're $1.39, they pull out $1.39 or a credit card, they pay for their beets and move on. If you compare that scenario to the healthcare scenario, ask yourself whether or not you're the shopper or you're the beets. You are the reason in our current healthcare system that a financial transaction happened, that a payer paid a provider. And we are not customers in our current healthcare system. We are the product. And that's the first problem. And because of that problem, you now are set up where you have two basic sets of entities, two industries that are negotiating with each other against their competitors. You have insurers and you have providers. And if you're an insurer, you don't really quite care about the overall cost of care because you figured out a long time ago that you can pull a bait and switch on your customer, right? The product. You tell them that the premium, what they pay every 2 weeks or a month, is so-and-so. And they think because the product is called insurance that they are sure that it's going to be there for them. But then instead of actually paying for all your healthcare, what they've decided to do is create these things called deductibles or copays that then pay you on the back end. So literally they put up a second paywall for the product that you already bought, right? Which was your healthcare. And so they don't really care about reducing the costs because they know they can hit you on the back end with the overall cost of your healthcare anyway, even though you already paid on the front end. So they have no incentive to reduce costs. Now, payers want to get paid more money, so they have no incentive to reduce costs. And all of them are negotiating against each other, right? So if you're a payer, your goal is to outplay all of the other payers per market share. And if you're an insurer, your goal is to get a higher market share among all the other insurers. So they play with each other, right, to negotiate rates that allow them to consolidate the market, not to reduce rates for you. They could care less. So costs continue to go up and up and up and up on you, the product. And then the third problem, right, is that if you are not wealthy enough or not insured, right, or not employed, you don't have a way into this market. And as the prices go higher and higher, the option set for you goes lower and lower, right? And normally most people talk about uninsurance as being the first number one problem, but I want to give you a sense of why uninsurance happens in the first place by presenting these other two problems, that you're the product and that the costs are incentivized to keep going up. And so the reason here that this keeps happening, that the costs keep going up and people get kicked out of the market, they can't afford healthcare, is because there are so many insurance companies and all of them are negotiating, right, with these providers. And their incentive is to keep letting the prices go up so that they can consolidate against each other, right? And they can outcompete one another and then eat each other. Basically, that's their goal. What Medicare for All does is it does away with the private insurance market, right? It now has one single payer. That's why we call it single payer, right? One insurance, and that is the government of the United States. It now can negotiate on your behalf, negotiating for everyone. And because it's the government, it covers everyone. It solves all of these problems, right? And in doing that, right, it would reduce costs in a number of ways. Number one, they're what's called a monopsony, meaning they're the one buyer of a good, and so they can set the price. We all know what a monopoly is. That's the one seller of a good, and they can set the price. But one buyer of a good is called a monopsony, and they can set the price. And then the second is that they reduce all of the overhead, all of the crosstalk between all of these doctors and hospitals and all of these insurance companies and all of the armies of billers that they need to have to be able to talk to each other, right? To know what billing code goes where. That goes away because you only have one insurer. And so the cost goes down for everybody. You can cover everybody. And contrary to popular opinion, or at least what the insurance industry wants you to think, right? They tell you that you're going to lose your choice. Under Medicare for All, you have more choices. Why? Because if you're insured via a private corporation right now, private insurer, they tell you what doctors you can see and what doctors you can't, right? Why? Because they want you to see the ones that they've negotiated with. They want to go to the ones with the best rates, right? That's why they tell you can't go to the others. With Medicare for All, there's one payer. You can go to any doctor you want, right? Because everyone, quote unquote, takes your insurance. And so it's cheaper for everyone. It covers everyone, and it actually increases your choice.
it sounds like a very good system. One much better than what we have here in Texas.
It sounds like a system that works. So I spent a lot of my career in the food system and have watched how sick our food system is, in that it is built to generate illness. It's not built to generate health. And I think that the only thing that flips it is if the company bears the responsibility for the health of its citizens, then the food system is going to follow suit, because that then is saving the system money. And in a commodity world that we live in, that health is not the commodity right now, diseases.
Yeah, I think you're raising a really great point here, Martha, which is that when the government becomes your health insurer, now the government has a real incentive to keep you healthy, because they don't want to pay on the back end, right? And so this is the point. And it's also relevant to COVID-19, because we have disinvested in public health all over our country because there is no incentive to keep you healthy in this healthcare system. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's building out our public health agencies so that we don't have major pandemics, or it's reforming our food system, right, so that we don't deal with the pandemic of obesity and diabetes and heart disease and cancers that flow from that, that incentive exists under a Medicare for All system in a way that it doesn't otherwise. And I think that's a really, really great point. I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thanks.
I want to respect your time. I think you were only here with us for 30 minutes, right, Abdul?
I was late, so if you want to take another 5 minutes, it would be fair.
All right, so
we just have 2 questions left, just so you know.
Okay, so on this last point, you're talking about how we're in this pandemic right now, but we also talked about how we're in this set of systems that are not incentivized to keep us healthy. As we're thinking about building, and you talked about Medicare for All, what do we need to be thinking about now? Because, having healthcare is one thing, but putting the support systems in place, around like public health, for example, right? And the institutions that think about those things, right? The things that were gutted as we got here. What other thoughts come up for you in where we need to be focusing?
Yeah, I'd say number one, I believe deeply that we need to start rethinking our relationship to our Earth. Climate change is real, it is imminent, and it is bearing down on us, and we're seeing it every single year in the form of ridiculous wildfires that are unparalleled, or a hurricane season that's already delivered 8 hurricanes into Hurricane Alley, and we're not even 2 months from the end. The way we have to do this is a systems level rethink of our economy, because right now we are addicted to a system of energy production that has us pulling stuff out of the ground to burn into the lungs of our children, that then goes up into our atmosphere and destroys that too, and leads to climate change. And if we're serious, that means that we have to reorient our economy around green technology and renewable energy. And that will create a tremendous number of jobs, which gets to the second question. I actually think that the way that we do our economy right now, and the onslaught of automation, poses some really, really, really serious and dangerous challenges for the future of how we think about work. And I think investing in a jobs guarantee or a universal basic income will be critical to making sure that everybody has the basic means of a dignified life. And then the last point that I'll make, just because I live in Michigan and we are the Great Lakes state, is water is quickly becoming the most scarce resource in our world. And I believe beyond a Green New Deal, we need a Blue New Deal to rethink the way that we manage and operate water resources.
That's all over Texas, is water scarcity and drought and the implications of living with that. So you ran for governor in the primary, and that's a big undertaking for you, for your family, for everybody. And you didn't come out on top, and you moved right into the rest of this work. Can you talk a little bit about, some people would perceive that as a failure. I perceive it as a path. But there's heartbreak involved often when you've put that much of yourself and your heart into something. What is it what does that feel like to you? Or how do you metabolize that, I think?
You know, I've had this really strange, fascinating, and meaningful 2 years to really think about what that meant for me, because I put everything on the line. I mean, I didn't really appreciate when I ran that why it is that everyone who runs tends to, you know, be independently wealthy and have a set of resources, both personal and professional. And I just didn't have. I was 32 when I kicked off the campaign, and I'm sure Christina can speak to this as well. And so we lived with my in-laws, right? Sarah was a resident. We had a baby in the middle of the campaign. And you know, I literally gave my whole life to this. You know, there are memories I'll never get back. I'll never see my daughter's first crawl. I'll never see her first word. I was, you know, at some town hall doing something, right, talking to someone, and I'm grateful that I did that. I don't look back at that and say I regret that decision, because I learned a lot, and I think there was an opportunity to change the conversation about our politics. You know, every campaign is an intervention on our democracy, and you know, you win or lose, you shape the conversation, and that matters. You know, for someone who's had a fair amount of success, to be known for the thing that I lost at best is, you know, I think my grandmother would say that's just symmetry. So I'm grateful for that. And the other point that I'll make is that there is something about recognizing both the power and the limitations of our politics. When I ran for office, I'm a policy wonk by you know, just generally by training. That didn't come through. Yeah. But like, you know, as a wonk, I ran for office because I thought that our politics was a way to get wonky policy that can work for people in place. But I increasingly came to appreciate that actually, at best, our politics is about translating our culture. Great politicians can do that translation of culture into policymaking, and can also shape some of the culture. And increasingly, I've been asking, what does it mean to engage on the level of our culture to build out a public conversation and a public ethos that is truer to our ideals about equity, and about justice, and about you know, technical accuracy, and about science. And so I've tried to spend most of my time doing that, and that has been really the focus for me right now. You know, I'll be honest with you, I love waking up and seeing my kid every single day. And as I think about what I want to be doing in the future, you know, a friend of mine told me when I was running, and it's been, you know, something I reflect on and play with in my mind every day, is that there are a lot of people who can be governor of Michigan. Clearly, our governor is doing a great job. There are a lot of people who can be a congressperson or a senator. There is nobody who's going to be my baby girl's dad except for me. And so, you know, I want to make sure that I dignify that responsibility and that opportunity, and that growth, as I think about where I head from here. So, you know, that's been something I'm thinking a lot about. And you know, and I say this from a position of privilege, right? Like, I, as a man, can say that, and people are like, oh, what a good dad. But I know that for women across this country, right, there's not a conversation about being a good mom and a good politician too. Everybody's like, well, how is she even thinking about, you know, taking that much time away from her kids? So, you know, I don't think I deserve any plaudits for saying I need to be a dad who's present, because parents need to be present people. And we don't give the same benefit to moms for showing up every day and doing that kind of hard work as we do for dads. And so, you know, my hope is that, you know, I can do that because it's the right thing to do, and also because my daughter's so much more than worth it, and also because my wife, you know, has aspirations, and she's a physician and an incredible professional, as well as an incredible partner and parent. And I just think that it's befitting of justice to make sure that I'm doing my part, and sharing equally in the load of parenting this incredible kid. And if we have another one, then that human being too. But so, you know, all that is to say, it is both humbling, you know, eye-opening, and gratitude-inducing.
See, y'all, this is why we had Abdul be our first man on the show, because we knew he would be so sensitive and thoughtful too about the issues that moms go through. So it's awesome to have you and great to hear that. And we're really glad you ran and that you joined us. And I know that wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for me. And I know it wasn't easy for you either. But it's a gift to even be able to do it, right? Even though the system isn't set up for us.
Yeah, and my teta would remind us that in the end, we have a certain set of opportunities, and our job is to use them. The outcome is oftentimes out of our control, but our job is to keep driving the institutional privilege and opportunities that we have to try and create them for other people. And the fact that you did that, Christina, and that Martha and Mona, you guys are spending so much of your time doing that work as well. That's what in the end, both history and whatever higher power you believe in will judge us on. So, and if we have that opportunity, what an incredible blessing and privilege to be able to do that. So, I'm really grateful to have had the time with you all today. Thank you for your work and this conversation. And I look forward to hopefully crossing paths again soon when we're out of COVID world and I can make it down to Texas, or you all find yourself in Detroit. Okay.
Hey.
Yeah. Abdul,
Great, thanks.
I'll just say one thing before we let you go, going back to the question Martha asked you, and you ran this race and there was probably some heartache involved, but I'm sitting here listening to you for the last 30 minutes and I am feeling such overwhelming gratitude, because if you had won that race, you would be focusing all of this beautiful intellect, energy, and intensity definitely for the benefit of Michigan. But I'm feeling grateful that someone is in this game that is not doing it for personal gain. You have some humility. Thank you, Teta. Right? Some intentionality. You are obviously driven to solve problems. And I am so tired of all the talking. I want to build the world that I want to be in. And we need our best and smartest minds doing this work, not just making money for other people. There is so much value in this work. It's obvious to me you're not transactional and that you refuse to leave anybody behind. And if there's anything that Three Righteous Mamas is about building a world that is better for all of our children. Mm-hmm. And I think your Teta is our light, and all of the mothers that are doing this for their children, that is our light and that is our path. And, inshallah, you will be a sadaqah jariyah for your Teta because of all the work you're doing. For those who are listening, sadaqah jariyah is like the good deeds that you do. Like for Abdul, he is his as a grandson, the good he does goes back to his grandmother. And so thank you so much for joining us. My cup runs over after chatting with you, and we look forward to crossing your path again. Y'all check out Abdul's book. We will talk about it in our close and also share his social media again for y'all. We'll let you go. We know you need to get going.
Well, thank you for having me. That's super kind of you to say. And, inshallah, we continue to get to do this work together. And, it is a team sport. So I'm grateful to be on such an incredible team with you all. So thank you all again. Really appreciate it.
My God, he's brilliant.
He's so smart.
I knew he was going to be, but I have 2 pages of quotes and notes.
I'm like, I gotta go back to my algebra book.
That part, if he had taught me algebra, I probably would have paid attention.
My mind was blown, y'all. He used algebra to explain the basis of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a way that not only did I've never heard before, but it totally had me percolating on I get to go back to the tech world and use that with a bunch of nerds who will get it in a way that a lot of the other conversations haven't landed. It's just brilliant. I kind of was I need the visuals to go along with what he's saying so people will get it. Oh my gosh.
I tried to write the equation down and I got it wrong.
I got it, girl. It's in my notes. I got it all.
I mean, I think what's exciting to me too is,
like, imagine someone like that being the governor of Michigan, also right after the Flint water crisis.
Right.
You know, like, wow. You know, it just speaks to so much of like, I feel like he said the power and limitations of our political system. And that's always what I feel is like the ideal and promise of real democracy done correctly, that there is no greater force on earth to create change. It's just not done right as often as we need it.
Was that cutting out for you, Martha?
Yeah, it was. And we need it because it was good.
Sorry, I just said that when I think about someone like
Still cutting out.
serving in office and what it could mean for.
Okay.
Okay, let me try again.
Fucking A.
Why don't we let someone else go and then, okay, you're unfrozen. Take
Do it.
four.
Okay, I was saying that when I think about someone like him getting elected, I think about how he said that there's the power and limitations of our political system. And that when democracy is done right, where we each have one vote that's equal, I really do believe that true democracy, there is no force that is more radical or able to foment change than democracy. It's just oftentimes not done right. And so for me, after listening to him, I'm like, how do we continue to build so that democracy can be done right? So a voice like his has equal weight, equal opportunity as someone that is independently wealthy to run for office.
I had so many things come up for me, but I don't know, Martha, if you want to go first.
Well, so the thing that kept coming up for me is he talked, or not, I mean, I had a billion things that came up, but one thing that really came up for me, especially as it relates to like the world that we are talking about wanting to build for all of our children, is the nexus of the three pandemics: the COVID-19, the systemic racism, and the insecurity and fear for the future. You can't untie any of them. Like, they are all sewn together and Christine, I think this takes it to your point, but at the foundation of our democracy, because our democracy was founded in scarcity and with the intention of power being held by the few, not the many. And I think that the democracy that we need to see, and the democracy that would actually give space and opportunity to all of the talent that exists in the world that is currently starved or boxed out of the opportunity, is a fundamental shift to an abundance consciousness that and I don't know how to legislate abundance, but I actually think Medicare for all is a good step in that direction. But like, we've got to reconnect with the place that more for me, or more for him, is not less for me. And that just isn't, it's not true. Actually, we have so much.
You can't get to equity if you don't believe that there's enough for everyone.
Right.
And so, and as a culture, and especially political powers, I always said, like, I think what bothers me about, I've met some great Republicans, I have great Republicans in my family, but there's been the current rise of the Republican Party, and it's operated like this at other times, and Democrats as well, is the place of scarcity, the place of fear and division as means to seek power, versus trying to create common goods that should be the rights of everyone. But I also do think that when you think about culture shifts, is I think about, I was actually telling this story at another event, and I was just, I'm in Ohio right now, and we went to go visit the town I was born in, which is in like Appalachia, rural Ohio. And a lot of my great grandpa used to work in this town, and he died of black lung. So it was like a lot of coal miners that used to work there. My mom lived there. It's a town of like 600 people, and she didn't speak any English. And my dad would leave for like weeks or months. And for a time period, she didn't have any money, and she didn't have any food. Like, she only had beans. She could only buy beans and oatmeal. And one of the neighbors, a little girl, came over and she wanted to play with my sister, and she opened up the fridge because she wanted a snack. And there was just like bear with one bowl of beans. And that little girl couldn't believe that my mom didn't have any food, and she was pregnant with me. So she went home, and that night, her mom and another woman came to my mom's house, and they left her with so many groceries and food and meat and all kinds of, and my mom just cried and cried, and she thanked them. She's like, I didn't speak any English at the time, but I tried to let them know I was going to pay them back. And they told me I was never allowed to pay them back, that I was just supposed to help someone else when I saw that they needed it. And she's like, I never felt so much love from strangers, people that I couldn't even speak the same language as, and they took care of me. And what if that was like, whenever we see someone that's in need right in front of us, most people act, right? But we're taught at a cultural level not to act, at a systemic level. But I actually think that if we fundamentally changed and thought of how we would care for any neighbor or friend in need as we would care for our society, then it would change everything in our political system if that was our guiding value.
I think that Abdul actually touched on that, on where, you know, we tend to affiliate too much with our institutions, and we seem to have lost hold of our values. And Christina, what you talked about, those are our values that we hold between our neighbors and what we feel is our community. And I think we've lost sight of that. And I was really struck by he had this superpower of being able to see the path forward, of like, where do I build and where do I go? Because he had been between so many lanes and so many different cultures. He didn't have the like assumed lens of like, this is the only way things should be. And I feel like we need so much more of that, stepping in each other's shoes and having different experiences, or traveling and just leaving our town, so that we can take the limited view off. And I'm not saying people who don't travel are limited, but it's like, even just think about, I was talking about this the other day, like if you're in a parking lot, you can see what's right around you. You might not be able to see what's past you, but if you go into the building and you go up onto the roof, and now you come and you look down over the railing, the view of the parking lot completely changes, and you have a different perspective, and you see it's exact same parking lot, but your approach is different. And it's like, how do we start looking at problems from different angles so that we can actually identify solutions? And I really think that that is his superpower, and that's what he brings to the table, to be able to look at things from a different angle and like be that builder and find that path forward, to be like, this is what we need to do. I refuse to stay painted into this corner just because you tell me so, because I see a path forward here. And I was just so blown away by that. And it is a hope I have for my kid to like not get boxed in. And I hope that we all have that, right? We need that so badly right now.